Matthew can do anything for his wife, even if it is taking the help of a strange creature. Matthew and Claire's happy life changes when Claire gets very sick. Matthew tries a strange ritual to help her. He uses a bag in Claire's blood to try and fix things. But scary things start happening in their home. Claire's health gets worse and Matthew faces weird things. But their perfect life changed when Claire got sick. After many tests, doctors told them the sad news that Claire had a serious cancer. It was not possible to treat Claire's cancer because it had spread throughout her entire body. Claire understood this very well, so she decided to stop all treatments, including having her blood tested. However, Matthew was very insistent, so Claire eventually agreed to give a blood sample to her nurse. After the nurse left with the sample, Matthew's cousin tricked him, and Matthew took the blood sample from his wife. The reason for this would become clear later. Matthew then went to a bar and met a man named Al, who was supposed to teach him a ritual to cure Claire. They brought a heavy bag to their home. Al told Matthew to hide the bag in a place where no one could enter, so Matthew put it in the basement. Al then instructed him to take a candle and light it. After lighting the candle, Matthew was supposed to put Claire's blood in the bag and make a wish. Al warned Matthew not to look at or touch the bag, or even go into the room where the bag was kept. Matthew just had to take a few steps back and leave the room, and then the bag would start working its magic. Al reminded Matthew not to talk to the bag at all. Matthew responded that he wasn't crazy and wouldn't talk to it. Al said that Matthew would understand more in time. He also mentioned that there might be some strange things happening in the house over the next 3 days. Matthew had to put up with these strange occurrences. After 3 days, everything would be okay. After giving these instructions, Al left Matthew's house. At night, Matthew went to the basement to do the ritual. He followed Al's steps by lighting a candle and putting Claire's blood into a bag. After he made a wish, he took a step back and left the room. But, while closing the door, his lighter fell inside the room. To get it back, Matthew had to open the door again, breaking the rule of not looking at the bag. He saw the bag moving, which suggested there was something inside it, but he ignored it and left. Matthew had also set up a music studio for Claire. Since they were both singers, he hoped they would sing together in the studio. Unfortunately, Claire might never see it. While talking to his cousin, Matthew suddenly heard Claire's voice. He rushed to her room, but found her asleep, realizing it was just his imagination. The next day, while cooking, Matthew heard a woman's voice coming from his mobile radio. This time, the voice scared him. At night, he woke up to a clear voice that sounded like Claire's. She was saying she didn't know why she had cancer and that Matthew should have had cancer instead. Matthew got very angry. He was working hard to help Claire, and now she was talking like this. He went to Claire's room and found her still asleep. He figured that the bag in the basement might be causing all these strange things. The next day, Matthew's cousin came over again, and they played golf. By accident, their ball went into the basement room that was off limits. When the cousin went to get the ball, Matthew stopped him and told him not to go in. The cousin thought this was strange. After Matthew left, the cousin opened the room and saw the bag. Since many rules of the ritual had been broken, it was possible the ritual might now be undone. When the cousin asked Matthew about the bag, Matthew got angry and told him he shouldn't have gone into that room. Even though he was upset, Matthew didn't explain anything. He just said he wanted to cure his wife. As time passed, Matthew became used to the strange things happening to him. He often heard unusual voices and got strange phone calls. He even saw a girl with a black mark on her hand. These events made him very scared. One day, Matthew received a parcel. Claire had ordered it for herself. When Matthew opened the parcel, he saw Claire's head inside it. He was terrified and threw the box away. Claire, hearing his scream, got up from her wheelchair and showed him that the box only contained the wig she had ordered. Things became even more dangerous. Matthew was scared and wanted to talk to Al about everything, but Al did not answer his calls. Matthew did not know where Al lived, so he couldn't visit him. The next day, Claire's health seemed to be getting better, as if the ritual was working. She got out of her wheelchair and went to the kitchen. This made Matthew happy. He started cooking at the stove. Suddenly, someone put a hand on Matthew's shoulder. First, he thought it was Claire, but when he looked, the hand was dark and frightening. He realized the person behind him was not Claire, but an unknown entity. Angrily, he told the entity to leave. When he turned around, he saw that Claire was still in her wheelchair. She didn't know about the ritual. She thought Matthew was upset with her and had asked her to leave. Claire became very upset and left after Matthew's outburst. She was deeply affected by the situation. That night, she harmed herself by cutting her wrists. When Matthew saw this, he quickly called the doctor, but the call was answered by an entity. The entity accused Matthew of killing Claire. Suddenly, a knife appeared in Matthew's hand, and he woke up, realizing it had all been a dream. The next day, Matthew was pleased to see Claire walking and looking better than before. She lay down next to him, and they talked for a while before she went to the washroom. While Claire was gone, Matthew received a call from Claire. He was shocked because the figure next to him was not Claire, but an entity with her face. He hurried to check on Claire and found her in his room. Scared, he left the room. Matthew saw the same entity with a black mark on its hand that he had seen before. Terrified, he wandered into the forbidden room in the basement. He noticed the bag, which he had been warned not to touch. His torch fell, and a hand reached out from the bag to pick it up. Frightened, Matthew told the hand to go away, and it retreated. Even though he had locked the room, he could still hear voices asking to be let out. Matthew returned to Claire's room, but found she was gone. He searched for her and finally went to the studio, where Claire had been happy to see her new space. He wanted to tell Claire everything he had experienced. Matthew told Claire that he had joined a special group to cure her, and promised she would be completely healed. He explained that this ritual would make her as she was before, but mentioned he had to pay a price for it. Claire asked about the price, and Matthew admitted he didn't know what it was, only that it was required. While they were talking, Matthew received a call from Claire's nurse, who wanted to check on Claire's health. Matthew told her Claire was fully cured. The nurse was shocked by this news, because she had called to tell him that Claire had only 2 days left to live. She advised him to be with Claire as much as possible and to accept the reality. During the call, Claire went to the basement room. She saw the bag and began to feel worse, eventually becoming unconscious. Matthew arrived just in time, quickly picked up Claire and took her back to her room. He was deeply troubled by her condition and couldn't stand seeing her like this. Matthew decided he needed to get rid of the bag. He tried to throw it out of the house, but it was now much heavier and wouldn't move. Called Al for help, but Al didn't answer. Matthew left a message for Al, saying he was throwing the bag away, which broke another rule of the ritual by touching it. After this, Matthew sat down with his laptop to work. But scary pictures of Claire's test results began to appear on the screen. Terrified, he decided to find Al, no matter what. Matthew went to the bar where he had met Al before. He used information from the bar to find Al's address. When he arrived at Al's house and knocked on the door, the girl opened it. Matthew was shocked to see that she was the same girl he had repeatedly seen at his house with the black mark on her hand. The girl seemed very strange. Matthew found out that the girl was Al's daughter. She called Al, who came to see Matthew. She told Al to explain things to Matthew and that he needed to accept what was happening. Matthew, feeling confused and upset, stood up. Al asked him if he broke any rules of the ritual. When Matthew didn't answer, Al said many scary things were involved in the ritual and that Matthew needed to get used to them. Al told him that worse things were coming. Matthew asked Al to explain clearly. Al then told him about the bag. He said that the entity inside the bag didn't hurt anyone. It just replaced people. To show this, Al said the girl Matthew saw was not his real daughter, but a replacement. Al's real daughter had died, and he now lived with someone else. Al said the same would happen to Matthew. The entity was not curing Claire, was going to kill her and replace her with someone else. Matthew asked where Al's real daughter's body was. Al took him to the basement, where Matthew saw Al's daughter looking very sick and scary. Scared, Matthew left and went back home. When he got home, he saw his cousin at the door. He took his cousin inside and said he was taking Claire to the hospital. But it was too late. Claire had already died. Matthew was heartbroken. He cried for hours. His cousin felt very sorry for him. Suddenly, Matthew got up and asked his cousin to help him. His cousin was confused but helped Matthew bring the bag to the room. In the room, Matthew put Claire's body into the bag. His cousin thought Matthew was acting this way because he was very upset. After putting Claire's body in the bag, Matthew closed it. His cousin then took him out of the room and locked the door, thinking Matthew might do something bad with the body. He warned Matthew not to go near the room and said he would go inside and remove Claire's body himself. When Matthew's cousin went into the room, a scary entity came out of the bag. The entity used its large hands to kill the cousin. Matthew's cousin came out of the room in terrible condition, and Matthew was shocked to see him. Then, Matthew saw the frightening hand of the entity, and the entity attacked him. Although the entity wasn't fully visible, It seemed to be forcing something black into Matthew's mouth. The scene ended here. At that time, a nurse arrived at Matthew's house to check on Claire's health. Matthew opened the door, and it was surprising to see that he looked completely fine. He acted normally as if nothing had happened and told the nurse to go see Claire in her room. Matthew did this on purpose. He knew there was an entity in Claire's room. As the nurse went inside, the entity killed her and put her body into the bag. In return for the nurse's sacrifice, the entity revived Claire's body. However, this wasn't Claire. Her body was now occupied by another entity that would live with Matthew for the rest of his life. Matthew still had one part of the ritual to complete. After getting his wish, he needed to pass the bag to someone else, just like Al had given it to him. To do this, he met a friend at the bar. Her mother was sick, so he convinced her to take part in the ritual, promising that it would make her mother better. The girl agreed, because she had seen Claire, who used to come to the bar and seemed fine. Although she didn't know the truth about Claire, she took the bag to her home. With this, Matthew completed his ritual, and the movie ended.